everybody. Welcome back to the Katie Wheeler Accessibility Podcast. My name is Katie Wheeler, and I'm your host for this show where we talk about accessibility, technology, and more. In today's episode, I am very excited to have a very special guest with me, Daryl Perry, the host of the Cerebral Palsy Perspective. Hi, Daryl. How are you doing today?
Katie, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, I know you're really into fitness and all of that, and we'll get into that. And I know, you're a co-host of the Cerebral Palsy Perspective, and there's a lot of content on that show. But for my listeners, what was growing up and going to school like for you with CP?
So I grew up, for your listeners, I grew up I went to elementary school in the 80s, was in school in the 80s and 90s, and
Mm-hmm.
accessibility and support looked very different back then. There were definitely some really good teachers, some really good aides, some really good therapists, but it was just it's kind of night and day. And you mentioned the Cerebral Palsy Perspective podcast. Chad and I even did an entire episode on this on how different things were back then. But let's see.
Yeah.
I had I was in I was in a Head Start program for preschool. There were a lot of special ed kids in there when I was for that, and I liked that because I was aware that I had cerebral palsy, but everybody else either had CP or they had other stuff going on. And then when I started in elementary school, I was in I was in a mix of classes. I wasn't in special ed, but I also was in non special ed as well. And that I
Mm-hmm.
felt I guess growing up I felt like I didn't really know anyone else that was like me. Again, the kids like when I
Yeah.
was in preschool. Yeah, when I was in preschool, we didn't really we didn't really know each other. We were just really really little. And then as I was getting older, I knew if there was one other girl in my elementary school that had CP, and our cases were not at all similar. So I just kind of went I tried to fit in as best I could. I desperately wanted to fit in at the time. But it was a mixed bag. I had some people at school that were really, really nice to me. I had some that were really, really mean to me, but I mean, and most people just kind of did their thing. But no, I mean, it definitely the experiences that I had growing up really shaped the kind of awareness and advocacy work I do around cerebral palsy now. You mentioned the fitness piece of what I do. There's basically all the stuff that I do because there's some other areas as far as mental and emotional health and getting people to become comfortable in their own skin no matter what their situation is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that I'm involved in, but at the core of everything, is still this 8-year old that had cerebral palsy that wanted to had goals, had ambitions, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the experience that I had growing up. I would not be who I am or where I am right now.
So when I became an adult, I couldn't help but realize that many of the supports, such as PT and OT, um, kind of go away after you turn 18. And it's not that, medical professionals forget about you. They do give you stuff to do on your own, but um, is that kind of the same experience that you've had um, with the medical system? Is the fact that they kind of just let you go after you turn 18?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the whole thing, I mean, so there's support and resources up until the point when you're 18, and then when you're 18, when you become an adult, it does seem to be for a lot of people, it just seems to drop off. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, when I first got into, I had been involved. I had worked at a gym during college, during my last semester in college, and I had always kind of had one foot in the fitness space when I was working in marketing and advertising and sales, but I never really did anything with it. And then when I was starting to do stuff for Your Level Fitness, it was adaptive group fitness for adults that had cerebral palsy and other disabilities. I taught a class for a weekly class for a little bit over a year at the local United Cerebral Palsy location, and we had that class. At times, we would have between definitely around 20, maybe even quite a bit more than that. And everybody was, you had the full gamut. I mean, you had some people that were kind of adapting whatever
Hmm.
moves we were doing. We had some people that had no mobility. We had some people that were nonverbal. So, and that was, but they were still very much involved in the class and involved in what was going on. So yeah, I mean, it's when you're an adult, I feel like as an adult anyway, you kind of try to figure out what the rules are as you go along. But it's multiply that if you have cerebral palsy or if you have another disability or multiple disabilities, as
Yeah,
we do.
right. And like I've just noticed, since I've become an adult and stuff, that the weekly OT, the weekly PT has kind of gone away. And it's not that they, totally forget about you, but they kind of give you stuff to do at home and have your own routines so that you can focus and do things in your own way. It's not so much like clinical based, if you know what I mean. And the other thing too is we really appreciate your willingness to be that mentor for us in the disability community because that's very much needed. And along with that, what's one piece of advice that you would give to any parents or a child with a disability out there?
Yeah, so if you're and this kind of goes for both groups. If you're a parent of a child with disabilities or special needs, um, if your child shows an interest in anything, and it could literally be anything, it could be Legos, it could be video games, it could be building sandcastles, whatever it is, really like lean into them, really encourage the curiosity around that because you never know what that's going to lead to, and the child is going to be in a world where things are going to be different, and the world is not fair. The world can be a very cold place, but one of the greatest gifts, if you're able to position it right, is not being like everybody else, is being somebody that has their own path and their own thing that they do. And I think one of the biggest things, if you can foster creativity and just really having kids figure out allow them like
Y-
really encourage them to figure things out, really build into them a sense of confidence and awareness, they will navigate the world. People with disabilities are extraordinarily resilient because you have to find out, you have to
Mhm.
figure out. um, you've been you're in this situation in life, you are going to be resilient by default. And I think the earliest, like if your kids can have a sense of curiosity and confidence within themselves, then
Mhm.
they can make it. I think one of the toughest things, and you understand people's points of view, but bitterness from people that are in the disabled community, and it's tough because you can understand the point of view, like when people get on podcasts or they get on YouTube or they'll write on social media posts, because it really can kind of get amplified. They'll say really negative things, and there's a line between like talking about your experience and venting your frustration, which I think is a okay, and then
Yeah.
the whole like. But there ends up, it can very easily, if you continue to do it and other people kind of chime in with it, it's just this really really negative downward spiral, and I don't think it helps anyone. Most of all, it doesn't help the person that's saying the stuff and the people around them that's feeding into it. It just becomes this thing that weighs you down and makes life that much harder, because this stuff's hard. It really is. Everybody's situation is
Yeah.
different, but everybody's is hard.
I think the biggest piece of advice that I could give to anybody within the disability community, whether it be kids with disabilities or parents of kids with disabilities, would be to foster those talents early on that you see, because you never know what's possible and you never know what your kid is going to grow up to be. The second piece of advice that I would give would be to surround yourself and immerse yourself in the disability community, because I can say with true experience that I don't think I would be where I am today without the support of you and Chad and a couple other people. Because while, I had a strong support system growing up, um, it means so much to me to have the support of you guys, because you understand what it's like to have a disability. I don't have to explain what it means when you can't walk. I don't have to explain the countless obstacles that I have to overcome every day just to live, an ordinary life. And the community, the opportunities I've had, the opportunities that I will continue to have as a result of this podcast and certifications moving forward are just amazing to me. So, I really appreciate you guys.
Another thing
Yeah.
you mentioned, and I think this is really huge to call out, is you mentioned the support of the disabled community, and that was one like when I was calling out before that I was. That's why I said I went to elementary school in the '80s and I was raised in the '90s, and times were completely different because we didn't have the internet connection. I remember the first time that I was on Twitter and I saw it was actually our buddy Zachary Fennell. It was his CP chats that he was doing on Twitter, and I like people were responding to questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like other people that have been
Yeah.
through similar things. So I do think, I think the people in the community that you surround yourself with are are paramount. Again, like for I had mentioned the whole negative spiral, but you can also surround yourself with people that are very encouraging, very supportive, and actually do believe in and build into you. And I think having a level of understanding, because the tough part with cerebral palsy is everybody's case is going to be different. So like it's very easy to be like, oh,
Right.
their case isn't like mine, or I have it worse than they do, or they have it worse than I do. Everybody's got their own stuff that they're working through, but like you said, having people that just like understand to some extent what you're going through, and it's not a competition of who has it best or worst. It's just being able to be understood and then be able to navigate life in the way that you want to do it.
Right. And I think one of the last questions that I have for you today, because I know we're short on time, is there anywhere specific that you want your listeners or clients to go to be able to work with you, to connect with you, etc.?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the best place to go if you're going somewhere online, it's going to be yourlevelfitness.com, and that's got all of my social media stuff. That's got all my website content on it. But the best way to reach me is by email, and that is Daryl at yourlevelfitness.com. So that's DARYL at yourlevelfitness.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I look forward to having you on future episodes to have a roundtable discussion as more and more people tune into this podcast with the more guests I book and so forth. So, this has been great, and keep in touch. Thanks.